Hey guys, so in this video I will be covering finding the midpoint between 2 points. I will start off with some really basic examples, and then from there I will build off it and do more advanced questions and some application problems. And then at the end I will explain why the formula works the way it does. If you're asked to find the midpoint between 2 points, x1, y1 and x2, y2, this will be your formula for the midpoint. So it's a coordinate, so we want it to be our x coordinate, comma, our y coordinate. So the x-coordinate of the midpoint would be x1 plus x2 divided by 2. And the y-coordinate of the midpoint would be y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Let's go through some examples. So this one says find the coordinates of the midpoint of the line segment joining -2, 1 and 5, 4. So here we have it graphed. We can see our 2 points, and our midpoint is the point directly in between the 2 points. So right in the middle of the line. So we can use our formula. We have to choose which points we want to name x1, y1 and x2, y2. Same as the distance formula, it doesn't matter which one you choose to be which, as long as you are consistent. And by that I mean, if this is x1, this has to be y1. And if this is x2, then the one with it is your y2. So 0.1, 0.2. Okay, so we're going to plug our numbers into our midpoint formula. So we know that the midpoint is a coordinate, and it's going to be our two x values added together. So x1, x2 divided by 2. So it's going to be -2 plus 5 divided by 2. And our y coordinate is going to be our y1 and our y2 added together. So 1 plus 4 and divided by 2. So that means that our midpoint is going to be 3/2, comma, 5/2. And since those fractions don't simplify down, we can leave it like that instead of putting it in decimal form. We could double check that this seems to make sense. We know 3.2 is 1.5. And if we look at the coordinate of m, it looks like it would be roughly 1.5 and 5.5. That looks about right because we know that's 2.5. Perfect. Okay, let's do another basic example. Find the coordinates of the midpoint of the line segment joining 5, 9, and I'll just correct that there, -3, -4. So same thing as before, we're just going to choose to name one our first point, so x1, y1, and x2, y2. So we can go ahead and put those into our midpoint formula. I'll just rewrite it here so we have it, x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So that means our midpoint is going to be 5 plus -3, because those are our x points, divided by 2, comma, because our midpoint is always a coordinate, 9 plus -4 divided by 2. So that's our y1 and our y2. So we're just going to work that down. 5 plus -3 is 2. So we end up with 2/2. And 9 plus -4 is 5/2. So we can simplify that. We have 1, comma, 5/2. We'll leave it as a fraction. You could put it as 2.5, but either way, you're correct. All right. So this one's a little different. In this case, you're given the midpoint and asked to find another point. So M is the midpoint of A and B. Find the coordinates of B for A being 6, 4, and M being 3, -1. So that means that M is in the middle of A and B. So we're not really sure where B is, but we could just say he's somewhere there. We have our M, we have our A, and we have to find our B. So we know that B is some unknown. Let's name him x2, y2. And A, we're going to have them be our x1, y1. And we know that it's going to equal our midpoint. So we know that the point 3, -1 should equal our midpoint formula. So 6 plus x2, and we're just going to plug x2 right in because we don't know what he is, divided by 2, comma, 4 plus y2 divided by 2. Okay, so I could split these up individually. I know that whatever x coordinate I get here has to equal 3. So I know that 6 plus x2 divided by 2 equals 3. And I know that 4 plus y2 over 2 equals -1. I'm just going to solve those individually for x2 and y2. So I'm going to rearrange by multiplying by 2 to both sides. That will get rid of that 2. And we will have 6 plus x2 equals 6. So now I'm going to subtract 6 off both sides, and I'm going to get x2 equals 0. So I know that that's the x-coordinate of my point B. For this one, I could multiply both sides by 2. Oops. So I would have 4 plus y2 equals -2. Then I could subtract 4, and I get y2 equals -6. So I know that my coordinate for B is 0, -6. Again, if we want to double check this, we can check that the midpoint between B and our A comes out as 3, -1. So line PQ is the diameter of a circle with center 3, -1/2. If Q is -1, 2, find the coordinates of P. So let's just draw that out very roughly. We have some circle that has some diameter, and we know what P is, or sorry, we know what Q is, and we know what the center is, but we don't know what P is. That's just the same as the last question. Sorry, my printer's making noise. Where we're given the midpoint, and we're given one of the points, and we have to find what this point is. So I know that if I have Q, which is -1, 2, and P, which we'll just call x1, y1, or x2, y2, doesn't matter. They're unknown. You can call them A and B even, it doesn't matter. And we know that the midpoint of these two is going to be our center. So let's go through that. We're going to have 3, -1/2 should be the midpoint of these 2 points. And to find the midpoint of these, it would be x1 plus x2. So we're using this as x1, or x2, x3, y2, sorry, over 2. And we have y1 plus y2, which is 2, divided by 2. All right, so same as the last question, I know that this should all equal 3 because it's my x-coordinate of my midpoint, and this is the x-coordinate of the midpoint here. So x1 plus -1 over 2 equals 3. And y1 plus y2, which is 2, divided by 2, I know equals -1/2. I'll just stick it on that side. So I'm going to solve these individually. I'm going to multiply by 2 on both sides to get rid of that. So I have x1 plus, I'll just write that as -1 plus -1 equals 6. So x1, I'm going to add 1 to both sides, is 7. So I now know that the x-coordinate for P is 7. Over here, let's solve this. If I'm dividing by 2 on both sides, if I multiply to 2 on both sides, that's just going to get rid of those both. So that's actually quite convenient. And I'd have -1 equals y1 plus 2. I'm going to subtract 2 because I'm trying to isolate for y. So I get -3 equals y1. There we go. So I now know that my coordinate for P, which I named x1 and y1 at the beginning, I know that P is the point 7, -3. All right, now for this one. This one seems more complicated than it really is once you get going with it. So the diagonals of the parallelogram PQRS bisect each other at point X. Find the coordinates of S. Okay, so we kind of have to break down what we know. We know that X is the midpoint of both SQ and PR. So we can find him. Once we know him, we're going to know, it's going to become a question like up here, because we have the midpoint and we just have to find the other point that it's the midpoint of. So we're going to use P and R to find the coordinate X. And the reason for that is because we have both P and R. So we'll take 0, 3, and 3, 0, and we're just going to name them 0.1 and 0.2. So x1, y1, x2, y2. Again, it doesn't matter if you switch those up or do it different, you're still going to end up with the same midpoint. So our midpoint, let's call that x, because that's what he's named already. It's just going to be 0 plus 3 divided by 2, comma, now my y1 and y2, so 3 plus 0 divided by 2. So I now know that the coordinate of x is 3 over 2, comma, 3 over 2. So I could fill that in if I want. I'll just draw them in here, 3 over 2 and 3 over 2. So I know that 3 over 2, comma, 3 over 2 is the midpoint of 5, comma, 3 and whatever s is. So I'm going to name s, let's do it a and b this time. I'm going to solve for a and b. You can call it x1, x2, x1, y1, x2, y2, but a and b works as well. So the midpoint formula, let's just write that out again so we have it. All right, so we know the midpoint is 3 over 2, comma, 3 over 2, because the midpoint is coordinate x. And we know that that is equal to x1, let's decide this is our 0.1, and this is, oops, I keep doing that, y2, y1, there we go, x1, y1 together, and x2, y2 together. So that means that 5 plus a over 2, comma, 3 plus b over 2 is our midpoint, and we know that's equal to x. So again, I can break these up separate because I know if this is my x coordinate for the midpoint, it has to equal this because I know my midpoint is x. So 5 plus a over 2 equals 3 over 2. And same argument, I know that this is my y coordinate of the midpoint, which we already know is going to come out to be 3 over 2. And we're just going to solve for a and b. So I can multiply both sides by 2. That's going to simplify that. We end up with 5 plus a equals 3. If I subtract 5 from both sides, we end up with a equals -2. So that we know is the x coordinate of point S. Then for this guy, I'll squeeze him up over here. I'm going to multiply both sides by 2 again. And I'm going to have 3 plus b equals 3 because that took away both of our divide by 2's. So that means b equals, I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides, and that's going to give me 0. And remember what b was? It was the y coordinate for point S. So that means that S is the point -2, comma, 0. All right, so now just, one more example. So this one's going to include a bit more. It's going to include our distance formula, which there's another video on. Triangle ABC has vertices A, B, and C with those points. Find the length of the line segment from A to the midpoint of BC. So first thing we need to do is find the midpoint of BC before we can use our distance formula. So let's do that. Midpoint of BC, I'm just going to rewrite BC up here so I can just name them 1, -1, and 5, 2. I'll call this x1, y1, x2, y2. All right, so we know the midpoint equals x1 plus x2, so 1 plus 5 divided by 2, comma, y1 plus y2, -1 plus 2, and then divided by 2. So I know my midpoint of BC. If you want to remember, you could just write it midpoint BC like that, just so you don't confuse yourself. That would be 6 over 2 and 1 over 2. -1 plus 2 becomes +1. So we could simplify that. Midpoint of BC is 3, 1/2. Okay, so now I have to find the length of the line segment from A to the midpoint of BC. So from -1, 3 to 3, 1/2. Remember from the last video, or if you haven't watched it, just go back and watch it. Our distance formula is the following. It's x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So if you're ever asked to find the length of a line segment, it's the same as asking for the distance between 2 points. So I'm doing this for the point A, which is -1, 3, and point M, which is 3, 1/2. So just name one x1, y1, and the other one x2, y2, and we're going to fill it into our distance formula. That will give us the distance between the 2 points, which is the same thing as the length of the line. So we have distance, or length, equals the square root of 3 minus -1 squared plus 1/2 minus 3 squared. All right, so distance equals the square root of 3 minus -1 is 4 squared plus 1/2 minus 3 is the same as 1/2 minus 6/2. So it's going to be -5/2 squared. So then D equals the square root of 16 plus 25/4. Okay, so to add these together, we're going to have to get the common denominator. 16 times 4, we can turn that, 16 becomes 64/4. Those are equivalent fractions. Plus 25/4. This then gives us 64 plus 25 is 89. So 89/4, and we're square rooting that. Since that's an irrational number, we can leave it like that. If we want, we could simplify it into square root of 89 over the square root of 4, which is just 2. That's also correct. But either way, we have the length, of the line between point A and the midpoint of B and C is 89 square rooted over 2. And we should always say units if it's not given. So units. All right, so then now for just a quick explanation of why the midpoint formula works. So if you want to find the coordinate of a midpoint, the value of x, so think just in horizontal, the area where the x is going to be perfectly between the two x values. So to find the middle number between two values, we know that we just add them together and divide by 2. It's the same as finding the mean or the average of data, the average between two numbers, the middle of two numbers, all the same, you add them together and then divide. So I know that for just the x coordinate, it is going to end up being the average of the two x's, so x1 plus x2, and divided by 2, which we know is our coordinate for the midpoint. For the middle of y, so think only vertically, we know that if we want to find the midpoint, it's going to be the middle of where y1 happens and the middle of where y2 happens on the vertical plane. So again, to find the middle of two numbers, we just add them together and we divide by 2.